Yeah, VRX. I started looking at silica sand in 2017, and mainly because at the time, um, China made silica sand a strategic mineral, and I wondered why they were doing that. And it it really was a time when Australia exported a little bit of silica sand. The single biggest exporter of silica sand happens to be Cape Flattery in northern Queensland, um, and it was the major exporter, and it exported 2.5–3 million tonnes a year. And also here in Western Australia, we've got Kemerton Sand and we've got Hanson Industries, both export silica sand and all through to Asia. So I could see there was an opportunity there. So pivoted the company around that time into silica sand. And in fact, we had other projects and we dropped those projects. So we've been involved in silica sand since then. All right, yeah, we've got three projects. And combined, we've got over 1 billion tonnes. So there's no exploration risk with this, and there's an enormous amount of sand. And we've engaged a young guy who's been selling silica sand into Asia for about 17 years now. He's based in KL, and he's been chasing up interest from potential buyers in Southeast Asia. We're not dealing with any traders. We're only dealing with end users. And at the moment, we're only dealing with buyers potentially in Korea, Japan, Thailand, Philippines, and Malaysia. But there's an enormous amount of interest. We've got over 65 companies that have expressed an interest to buy sand. A lot of those are traders and a lot of those are China, but we're ignoring at the moment. So we've completed exploration drilling, we've done test work, process circuit design, engineering, and so we're able to put out a BFS, which we did in 2019, and it's got a combined NPV at a 10% discount of over 700 million. But the joy of these projects is the capex is quite low, and it's just around $30 million per project. Each project will have their own processing plant, about 2 million tonnes per year. We're leading off with Arrowsmith North. When it comes to the environmental approvals, these are going to be difficult projects. They're very big areas, and we're seeking approvals for over 1,000 hectares. And that presents quite a challenge. And the more benign environmental conditions are at Arrowsmith North, so we're starting there. And we've got mining leases and miscellaneous licenses to access those. They've all been granted. And we're well down the track with environmental permitting. We're about 2.5 years into that process. We've lodged referral documents for Arrowsmith North. We've lodged a draft environmental scoping document. We've got draft comments back, and we're dealing with those at the moment. There don't seem to be any big hurdles. We don't have threatened or endangered species. We do have some priority species of flora, which we're easily able to avoid. And some of the requirements in the comments we got back are really about drafting different diagrams. So we're working on that. But the opportunity here is also potentially for future glass making in Western Australia, and it's something we're trying to get the government involved in. There is no glass production in Western Australia, so there's a big opportunity there. We've got about 500 odd million shares on issue. We've got a number of options out there. We're market capped about 127. We've got 14 million bucks in the bank. We don't need to raise money before we make a decision to mine. And in fact, we're using some of that money at the moment to buy some second-hand gear that's become available and is in the right size and right condition for us. There's no debt. The board and management hold a reasonable chunk. We've had a couple of capital raises last year, which put that money in the bank. We've got Paul Boyatzis as the chairman, myself, and I've had about 40 years in the mining industry. Peter Pavlovich is a mining and software executive. Steve Papadopoulos is our commercial manager. Yunil Kim is our marketing manager. He's very important to us. We've got him loaded up with options. And his contacts in Asia are invaluable. We do get a bit of brokerage coverage from Argonaut Euros. They haven't been updated for a while, but they'll get updated when we get closer with the environmental approval. But this is the important bit. And if you do any research on silica sand, and people should do their own research, you'll find it very difficult to find out what happens with the end use. And the biggest consideration really is there is innumerable uses of silica sand. You're staring at it for a start in LCDs. The lights above you, in the paint around you, the concrete around you. So really, the demand for silica sand really is concrete. And that's the biggest issue, that it doesn't leave sand available for those other uses, particularly making glass. So it's the most used commodity on the planet, but people don't really recognise it. You think, oh, there's plenty of sand around, but desert sand's no good for making glass or concrete. Beach sand certainly are, predominantly calcium carbonate. They're not suitable either. So finding suitable sand, one for concrete, and more so for making glass, where you need better quality, is getting more and more difficult. And certainly in Asia, it's becoming quite an issue. So it's a finite resource, and it's rapidly running out. The use is staggering. Sand pricing. This is the sand pricing for flat and container glass, which is what we'll produce at Arrowsmith North. It's been steadily increasing, and that's really a recognition of the tightening up of supply. The actual consumption, it dropped last year, mainly due to COVID, but almost all the glass manufacturers that were, beginning of last year, beginning of COVID, they were very wary of doing anything, long-term contracts, but now they're a lot more comfortable in doing that. And with all the construction that's going on in Asia, at Southeast Asia at the moment, there's a huge demand for flat glass and for concrete. There's a predicted deficiency between supply and demand, but really that is very dependent on the use in China. They're the biggest users by far, and that's the most difficult place to get any data. But when you talk about importers and exporters, there's almost no seaborne trade. All the Asian countries, bar Vietnam, have banned exports of silica sand. So there is no sea trade. So it's very difficult to track where all this sand is going. So most of it's domestic consumption, except that the domestic supplies are drying up. So we've got three projects, Arrowsmith North, Arrowsmith Central. They'll both export out of Geraldton and Mouchet, which is higher quality. The critical number for making glass is 99.5% silica dioxide. The iron content from then on determines which end user it ends up with. Mouchet is 99.6, 99.7% in the ground. And we can produce up to 99.9%, and that's suitable for making ultra clear glass. And ultra clear glass is the glass that goes over solar panels, which is the largest, fastest growing market in glass making. So every glass manufacturer wants to be making that, but it's extremely difficult if you don't have the right quality sand. Almost all of these, we've finished the engineering on one plant, and our estimated costing a couple of years ago is still very close to the mark. It's about 30 million bucks to put a plant in there, but the actual plant is almost the same cost for each of these. The engineering is the same. The process circuit is the same for each of them, so we don't need to re-engineer them. It's really the access and the ancillary equipment that varies between each of them. Water we get from Yarragadee North. They've got terrific access from the Brand Highway, and each of them will end up with a hybrid, either gas, solar, or else at Mouchet, probably local grid. Really, this timetable is very, very dependent on the EPA. We're getting close, so close to that at the moment, I can almost touch it. So we're getting close to that. And as soon as we get some more feedback from the EPA, we'll have a better timeline for that. But it's not far away. Mouchet, very similar. We'll probably have a mixture of grid power and solar there. We've got agreements with the state. We've got agreements with the local native title people. When we selected these sites, there were three criteria. One, had to be in the right geology. So these are granite-based sands. 2 had to be on vacant Crown land, and 3 had to be next to a railway line. This is a bulk export commodity initially. And when it's on that vacant Crown land, there are only 2 stakeholders. That's the state and the native title claimants. And we've dealt with those. Ditto Mushay, it'll be behind. There's probably another year's worth of work we have to do to follow up with that. And also cops more scrutiny. It's only 50 kilometres north of Perth. So each of these projects have very good economics, and they're improving all the time. The demand for this is very, very high. It's a simple process. All the equipment is out of the mineral sands industry, so there's lots of that in Western Australia, and we're identifying equipment at the moment that we can possibly get. And really the key here is attrition. So the rest of the circuit, attritioning is just an agitated slurry, and it's grains rubbing on grains. And from that, we can clean up. It polishes each of the grains. And then the rest of the circuits just get rid of the clay that you actually rub off. So it's simple. There's no chemicals. There's no dust. And it just uses water, uses a lot of water. We've developed this fairly unique mining method. It's called vegetation direct transfer, where we take the topsoil off and we put it back behind us where we've just been mining. There's animation on our website. You can have a look at that. I don't think I'll have time to show it today, but it'll demonstrate, how we intend to do this. It is unique, and it tends to throw the EPA when you put in something unique. But the bush that we've got is very similar to what sits behind me. That's actually a photograph of Arrowsmith North. It's only waist high. So the root systems only go 200-300, and we're taking 400 mil off the top. So it's a very effective method. Now we're very cognizant of the ESG requirements, and while we're at this planning stage, we can put a lot of policies and sort of methods into place where we can minimise our impact and maximise our use of solar. There's probably 50 windmills within 20 kilometres of where we are. I'm not sure how we're going to get access to those, but certainly solar. And we've got a gas field. The Waitsia gas field is right next door to us. So we can use clean energy locally. There's quite high unemployment, so we can get to use that quite a bit. We're being innovative about what we're doing, and certainly with the rehabilitation and with our mining method, we're looking to reduce our carbon footprint as well. But we're certainly an industry leader. We started on this in 2017. There will be a silica sand sector in Australia. There isn't at the moment, but it's rapidly growing because it recognises that Southeast Asia needs a lot of sand. So these are all 100% owned, quite significant resources. Ultimately, we'll get access to this ultra clear glass market with our Mushay project. There are no restrictions on exporting from Australia. So it's recognised it's low sovereign risk, strong offtake interest, project economics are good, particularly because of the capex, and these are very long life. So, and if we can, in the future, what we'd like to do is some more of the downstream processing, particularly for glass manufacturing. So thank you very much. And